Welcome to the Science of Parenting podcast, where we connect you with research based information that fits your family. We'll talk about the realities of being a parent and how research can help guide our parenting decisions. I'm Mackenzie Johnson, parent of two littles with their own quirks, and I'm a parenting educator.
And I'm Lindy Buckingham Shutt, a professor of human nutrition, guest co host, and a mom to one sweet angel baby and one young dedicated eater. Yes.
Dedicated, dedicated.
Dedicated. Yeah.
If you haven't been catching it every week, Lindy has been changing, not changing what kind of eater, changing her description of the kind of eater he
Yes.
is.
Yes.
And
There's
every week I'm like, what
lots.
is it?
I know there's just so many adjectives for what kind of eater he is.
They're all
Oh,
so accurate.
hmm
So here we are in our season finale of season 10, which means when these episodes with us are kind of coming to a close here. But we've been loving having these conversations with you, and so
oh,
many, for real, so much insights, like brought so many like research based resources to us. And yeah, we've had a chance to cover a lot of eating and feeding topics, which have been a
oh,
lot
yeah.
of fun.
Always here for it. That's kind of why I got into nutrition, is because I just like to talk about food. So,
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's talk more. Well, because last week we were talking about picky eating. And then yeah, this week we're gonna kinda, I
yeah.
mean, wrap it up, right?
Yeah, good one.
Wrap
Pun.
top.
Pun very much intended. Oh, we love
Yeah.
those food puns. But yeah, no, today we're gonna wrap it up. We're gonna kinda, summarize everything we talked about this season, and then we're also gonna talk about recommendations from the dietary guidelines for Americans.
Yes, and that it is the we're kinda going back to the big picture, right? Like, what we've shared really specific information, and we've gotten into, like, really strategies that are related to, like, specific behaviors and right? We've even talked, like, macronutrients, micronutrients, right? And so
Mhm.
which was important, right? That's important information, but
Oh, yeah.
going back to the big picture, it's like, okay, yeah, we've had 8 episodes of information, and there's just, like we're talking about general practices. We're talking about, like, daily life, things like that. So don't get
Yeah.
overwhelmed.
Yes, it's a big picture day and very
Yeah.
exciting for all of you.
Yes.
You can listen to this one on hyperspeed.
Yeah. Yeah. 1.5. Mackenzie DeYoung, I think that's what she likes is 1.5 speed
Mhm.
when she listens and watches things. So yeah, let's just kind of like you said, let's give it a run through of what all we've covered this season. We'll kind of go through the highlights of these different episodes.
Yes, yeah. So, if you can think back all the way to our first episode, the first thing we talked about, really setting the stage for all of our future episodes, was we looked at what influences what our kids eat, and we did this by looking at this model, where you see different parts, different layers of this model that influence what our kids eat. And so the very beginning or the very middle part of that model is our child traits. And
Mhm.
then if you look outside of that, so what influences what our kids eat directly, that might be their temperament, that could be genetics, that could be those type of things. But then we start to go out and we think about, okay, well, parents' practices also influence what our kids eat,
Yes.
right? So our different feeding styles, our different food parenting practices, the way we were raised as parents, what we eat, all influence what our kids eat. And then we also can look at how our community and culture, so access to food, affordability of food, what kind of food the rest of our family eats, what our cultural food is, that all influences what our kids eat.
Yes. And I loved that model as a way of thinking about I mean, it, like, gives grace and it, like, gives power, in both ways of, like, some of these things aren't gonna be within my control. Can't
Mhm.
control my child's temperament, but there are things I can do, and, yeah, that model was a beautiful way of, like, all of these things fit together to create the picture of, the things our kids actually eat. We love that model.
Yes. Yes, and again, I think I
Yeah.
have said this before, but all of those things are bidirectional. So what our kids
Mm,
do, our kids' temperaments and traits influence our practices as parents in terms of what we're feeding them. So, there's all of these different ways these work together. And if where I think we might talk about it, or if you go back and listen, you'll hear about us talk about that when we talk about temperament.
yes, yeah, that it's not just one way, like, it doesn't just influence us or we don't just influence them. Goes
Mhm.
both directions for sure. And then in our second episode, we talked about what we bring to the table,
Mhm.
AKA our feeding style. In addition to maybe the food we bring to the table,
Oh yeah.
but that we bring a feeding style. And so these you might remember really parallel. They align with Diana Baumrin's parenting styles that we often refer to, even when we're not talking about food, of like authoritative, authoritarian, permissive, and uninvolved, right? Those 4 parenting styles are aligned with the 4 feeding styles. And essentially what we've like looked at in the research was there's a lot of positive outcomes associated with the authoritative, similar to parenting. There's a lot of positive with that style. And so that again, that's balancing having high responsiveness to like our children's needs and like their experience, as well as balancing that with kind of appropriate control and demandingness and expectations, structure, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that all played perfectly when we talked about, feeding styles. It played perfectly into our next episode where we talked about
Mhm.
food parenting practices. So we how do I put into practice that authoritative feeding style? Well,
Yes.
the way we do that is through our food parenting practices, and the way that we can really provide that authoritative, that, be responsive, but also provide, be responsive, but then also have some demandingness around what we do, our
Mhm.
expectations around our kids. The way we do that is, one, providing kids autonomy to make their own decisions.
Yes.
And we also provide the appropriate structure. So that could be, having what kind of food we have in our house, when we eat meals, how we eat meals. But then that also includes avoiding coercive control. So not controlling
Mhm.
what our kids eat, not rewarding our kids for eating a specific thing or punishing our kids for not eating something. So those are
Mhm.
all ways that we can have positive food parenting practice or food, yeah, food parenting
Yeah, I was
practices.
like, "You had it, you
Like, oh
had
my
it."
gosh.
Well, it's how we put in yeah, I love how you've described it that way of, like, how we put into practice the style, right? The beliefs become the actions. Episode
Yes.
2 is beliefs, episode 3 is actions and how we actually practice it.
Yes.
All right, and then so we moved from kind of those parenting focused. I mean, they're all parenting focused, right? Science of parenting. But we talked about some of the child specific things that are happening. So that would be like the middle circle of that model we talked about. And so in particular, gotta talk about temperament. We ain't skipping it ever. But basically, like, yeah, every kid that is literally different. We know that. Or if
Mhm.
you've listened to season 3 and season 7 and every episode probably ever, because we always talk about temperament, every kid is different, and it's the case with food too. In particular, we talked a lot about certain traits like approach to new things and novelty. A high approach child, like, yeah, I'm maybe an adventurous eater, but could be prone to overeating versus a low approach child, maybe prone to some of that more selective eating,
Mhm.
versus intensity of reaction, the regularity and rhythm, as well as kind of sensitivity to taste and texture and those kinds of things. So all those temperamental traits are going to impact our kids' eating habits.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There was some really interesting research if you go back to it, particularly around how it affects picky eating and then also enjoyment of food.
Yeah,
Yeah.
love that.
Yes. So then we went all the way back to the beginning, before our babies were even born, to pregnancy and the first 1,000 days. So, first 1,000 days encompass that time during pregnancy all the way up to 2 years old. And we talked a lot about how this is this ideal moment in time. This is a opportune time to really set a strong foundation for our kids, in terms of how they will obviously develop, but then also those healthy eating habits. We talked about how 80% of brain growth development happens within this first 1,000 days.
So much.
So yeah, so much and so important for those little. So why it is important to prioritize certain foods and nutrients during this time.
Yeah, a great opportunity. Like, what a great
Mhm.
opportunity for us to set that foundation. And then, yeah, we kept looking at this like concept of age. How does age play into what our kids eat, what type of habits they have? And so we looked at kind of this like preschool school age. I mean, like literally just like kids. We talked about kids. I don't know. I refer to that age as kids.
Yes, kids.
But that there's so much development. I feel like every age, I think that like so much development. But across this, we really dove into some of those developmental domains of like what's happening socially, what's happening with their language, even their motor skills, right? Like what a preschool can do. They might not be ready to handle like a fork and a knife together,
Mhm.
but they can do, right? They can use general like little utensils and things like that. And so those developmental domains and how they impact the growth that happens in that age. And the other thing that I remember in this episode was that, especially as kids hit kind of that school age, it is when we can really have those conversations around like fueling our bodies and really kind of simplified, nutrition information of like this helps us grow, or this gives us
Mhm.
energy that helps last all day, or this help keeps our tummy full. And that school age is a really great opportunity to start having even like talking about some food groups because their
Yeah.
brain like cognitively can start to categorize better. And so again, lots of good stuff, but really we can start to have more of those conversations in this age, which is great.
Yeah, I loved this episode, because I always know I have great tips about, what to eat and,
Hmm.
kind of general nutrition, but it's also nice, as a parent of a growing child, you always get worried. It's like, "Oh my gosh, are they at the right stage? Are they doing this,
Yeah.
the right thing?" So this episode is really great to think about, "Oh, well, I shouldn't be, maybe I don't want to introduce that food, or my expectations are wrong at this age because they don't have the right words to use yet to tell me,
Yeah.
they don't like this food for this reason, or I don't have the right words to tell them, I think you should try it for this reason. So you're right. I think this episode hit home for me.
Oh, good.
Hmm.
Well, and it is. It's about what like we talked a lot about what's realistic expectations as we think about how kids typically develop, right? Typically,
Hmm.
there are exceptions to that, and they're like, okay, yeah, it didn't occur to me. I mean, I guess I just haven't worried about it yet. Like, at what age should I hand my child a knife? Right? Like, at what
Hmm.
age are your like motor skills and your consequence develop, like your understanding of consequences and risk, like all those things. So, yeah, lots of good stuff in that kids episode.
Yes. Yeah. And then we moved right into our teenage years, which I never want to go back to personally. Happy to talk about them.
Same.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, a lot of the things that are happening to teens, it's, why maybe there's all the angst around teens. That's
Mm.
why there's angst around feeding in teens, right?
Yeah.
You have a different, peer, kind of network, that different social pressure from your friends. So it's going to influence obviously what you're eating. You're more independent. You're maybe able to access foods in a different way, buy your own foods. You have a job or a
Mm,
car. You can go
mhm,
out to eat more. And then something we talked about in this episode too is body image. Body image obviously has a huge influence on what and how kids are eating during this age as well.
mhm. And yeah, yeah, I agree. I don't wanna go back to being a teen. Like, we will get there, right? We have children, so
Oh yeah. Hmm.
teenagers will exist in our realm. But yeah, the whole idea of actually when we were putting it together was like, we'll do an episode on the first 1,000 days. And it's like, well, maybe we'll talk about the rest of the ages. Maybe we won't. And then it was like, okay, hold on. We got to separate out kids. Okay, hold on. We can't do kids and teens together. There's so much here. And really, yeah, I remember this was such a big deal. I can't remember if I've already told this story of like my foster sister and I used to like when I got to go get gas to fill up my car and I could go inside the gas station, we'd get like, just like snacky things, and
Yeah.
of course like pop but that was like, yeah, that was such a huge part of being a teen and cooking my own meals sometimes
Hmm.
and yeah, so that our teens do have more independence, but also we're setting kind of the precursor, like right after teens is adults, or at least
Yeah.
emerging adults. And so it's a good time, but it is a crucial time too as we think about that body image and dieting. And it's a prime time for eating disorders. And so there's just a lot to think about with food and teens. And so basically after every episode that we describe, I'm going to tell you, and don't forget to go listen. There was so much good stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of good tips too. I mean, I know we're talking
Yeah.
about a lot of the hard things about it, but I think we're also being realistic
Mhm.
that teenage years are going to be hard. They're going to be
Mhm.
hard for feeding. We
Mhm.
know based off the literature that teenagers have the worst diet quality.
Yeah.
Nobody has great diet
Like
quality.
actual worst. Like not
The
like
actual.
yeah, I
Yeah.
was just gonna be like, not like, ugh, the actual worst. Like, no, no. Actually like the worst of not, like not good.
Yeah, yeah, we actually give age categories grades for diet quality.
Yeah.
We're all failing, but they are like failing the most. They have the worst grade out of all of the class. So be
Uh,
realistic that teenagers, yeah, their diet quality is lacking for a lot of these reasons. But like you said, there are strategies and tips and tools,
mhm.
outside of, even if you didn't set that strong foundation for your health, to raise the, that independent, healthy eater. That your teen, there's still ways to support that teenager during that time. You know, find autonomy in what they eat, but also providing that structure and not being too controlling about what they're eating, because we know that has negative impacts for teenagers, just like it does for toddlers.
Yes, all of them. Oh, and then finally in our last episode, we got to picky eating. I do feel like everybody was just like, "So you're gonna talk about it, right?" like, when you talk about it. We did, we talked about it. And yeah, oh my gosh. There were so many. I mean, like, the whole episode
Mhm.
of strategies, I feel like it was like, "You could this, think about this, think about
Oh,
this."
yeah. We could have done a season on picky eating, I feel
Yeah,
like.
so good. I think the thing that really stood out for me kind of as I went back and looked, like, what did we talk about? The key strategy is really repeated exposure.
Mhm,
And for some kids and for some foods even, it'd be like repeated exposure might be like 3 times and for like or 20 or it's gonna vary by food, by kid, but that like keep that in your back pocket is like, I'm offering it. It's offered. And then again, we go back to that division of responsibility of like I get to offer the food and yeah, thinking about the okay, I always get nervous when I actually have to say it. We decide when, where, and what is offered,
mhm.
right? Our kids decide how much, what, and whether. No, we decide what
How much and whether.
and whether they're
Like,
going
how
to eat
much they're gonna eat and whether they're going to
and
eat
whether
it,
they're going
yeah.
to eat.
Mhm,
And that, yeah, I love the division of responsibility, but that whole concept of whether they're going to eat has actually that's been really powerful for me. Even like with my co-parent and our conversations as we like, okay, we both grew up kind of in a more there was some, like, coercive, right? Like, "Oh, we
mhm,
wanna make sure you get enough to eat," right? Which came from a very good place. Our parents had experienced food scarcity, but so they're like, "Oh, eat, like, make sure you get enough." Um, but sometimes that was, like, coercive, and so we are trying to unlearn, and so thinking about as we encourage each other not to, "Oh, just try a bite. Oh, once you eat that, then you can have this." As we talk about it, it's like, okay, our kids get to decide whether they eat it.
mhm.
Not like the how much I feel like has been a little more in our vocabulary for a while, but whether they eat it has been really powerful. Like you can just say no thanks. It can sit on your plate. Maybe next time you'll lick it, like maybe or sniff it, or it's not on your plate this time because it's gooey or it might touch your other stuff, but maybe next time, right? Like that there's progress
Yes.
in picky eating that steps beyond just like, yeah, and they ate like 3 servings or
Yes, yeah.
yeah.
Yes, a little bit can be a win too, or not none of it can be a win. If it's on their plate,
Yeah.
that exposure is important. And again, that episode's all about different strategies to how to feed your kid, but also feed a picky eater who might not, even though they might not eat what's on their plate, how to
Mhm.
still feed that child.
Mhm. Well, one I'll even say, like, a win we had last night, I made, like, a taco bake recipe. It's just,
Mm,
like, we had some, like, meat, like, ground meat to use, and we do, like, just tacos all the time, but I was like, Okay, kind of a variation on it," and so it was, like, more of a bake, and then I served olives
mm,
alongside it, like, black olives, and which my kids sometimes will eat,
mm.
right? But, like
Black olives are very controversial. Black olives in
right?
general, I feel like are a very controversial food.
Like,
Oh
you're either
yeah.
here for it or you're not.
Yeah.
And, my son wasn't like, "I don't want that, like, it's yucky," and we talk on like, I have a value around that of, like, food's not yucky, you can say, "No, thank you, we're grateful for food, we don't call it gross." Um, but, like, he put it on his finger, right? Like, how you put
Oh
olives on
yeah.
your like, I
So
put mine on
fun.
my finger, and so it was like, you at least handled it, right?
Yeah.
You weren't interested in eating it, but, like, you touched it, you handled it, it was in your vicinity, it sat on your plate, and it was like, "Okay, that was progress."
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, it is. All those sensory things. It's just one step closer to getting. Well, yeah, obviously it wasn't like
Yeah.
a smell thing, and especially we think about if picky eating, it's a sensory thing. Like, yes,
Yes.
allow them to, play with their food.
Mhm. Alien fingers. That's
Yeah.
all I was gonna call it.
Aw.
Even the olive I was like, "Look, alien fingers, Milo."
Oh, I
And
loved
he
doing
did,
that. When I was a kid,
right?
I loved putting olives on my fingers. Yeah.
It's the
Mhm.
best.
It's so fun.
But so that was our win for last night. Oh, yeah, so we covered a lot this season, and yeah, every episode we're like, "Oh, and listen to that one was so good."
Yeah.
AKA, we also had a lot of fun talking about it and recording it.
Mhm. Yes.
Oh, so yeah, as we think about like this whole season of content and then like, yeah, the big picture, getting back to the big picture, the dietary guidelines for Americans, which Lindy like hooked me up to. I'm like, yep, that's my resource now. That's the one I love. They kind of had these 4 general guidelines in there of like, regardless of age, regardless of race, like culture, these were general, like, okay, we've been specific, right? Putting olives on your fingers is very specific.
Mhm.
And so going back to that kind of big picture, looking at kind of a final tidbit, a little bit of new information, sharing these 4 guidelines.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love the dietary guidelines for Americans for a lot of reasons. One, it's all evidence-based research that has been put together, have been vetted by the scientific community, by scientific committee, They do it every 5 years, so you have the most up to date information, and then they put it out, and it's into this amazing resource that is then used by the masses in America.
Mhm.
And what it really talks about, another reason I really love it is it talks about overall dietary patterns. So it makes it really, it's like a really easy entry point for anybody because so much in our society, I feel like we talk about, we do this, we it's called like reductionist theory. Essentially, we reduce everything down. It's like we have to eat this one, we have to eat broccoli to be
Oh.
healthy. We have to eat a blueberry to be healthy. We have to eat,
Mhm.
you know, a certain supplement to be healthy. Where that's what we know from the science is that's not necessarily the case. Of course, there's foods that
Yeah.
might be great for one specific disease state or another, but in
Mhm.
general, overall, like, there is a dietary pattern that we all can follow that will help us achieve the best outcomes in terms of our health. So, the Dietary
Yeah.
Guidelines for Americans presents that information in a really easy, consumable,
Yeah.
digestible
Ah! I love
way.
that word consumable always, like, when I'm talking about, like, teaching people and, oh, it fits here. Nothing better than
Mhm,
consumable.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so we're gonna talk about 4 of kind of those overarching tips that
Mhm.
the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, talks about.
Mhm.
So the first one is follow a healthy dietary pattern at every life stage.
Mhm.
So this is all the way from infancy. The dietary guidelines for Americans just started in 2020, covers all the way from birth, well, to death,
Mhm. Yeah, when you stop
uh,
eating.
and yeah, when you no longer eat. But yeah, they cover, what infants, what toddlers, kids, adolescents, adults, pregnant women, women who are
Mhm.
lactating, older adults, everybody eats. And something that they talk about too is it's never, and very important, it's never too late or too early to start eating healthy. So if you listen to these episodes and you think, oh my gosh, I have a teenager and I missed all of those early years and I
Mhm.
didn't do those things you talked about, it's okay. You can still use the same, tips and strategies that we talked about with your kid at any point in time. And then also, Mackenzie DeYoung pointed out, and very appropriately so, as someone who I think has developed her own dietary pattern over her lifetime, and she can share more about that.
Mhm.
But it's never too late as a parent to start changing your dietary pattern. And I think this gets back to one of those food parenting practices that is so important: the food environment that we present to our child. Like, what food do we have in our house? If we as parents maybe aren't making the healthiest decision. I'm not saying that you
Mhm.
should only have healthy food in your
No,
house, but
yeah.
if we have no, like if you don't eat healthy food, you don't model those behaviors, then your kid is less likely, based off of research, to model or to do the, to participate in those behaviors. So,
Mhm.
as a parent, you can start doing it right now too.
Yes, yeah, never too late, and I think the word that I really clung to in this kind of recommendation, this first recommendation is pattern, right?
Mm,
It's like, okay, pattern, AKA general practice, AKA most of the time, but not always,
mhm,
AKA, right? Like broadly in general. Because I do think sometimes, yeah, I like that reductionist word. Like we try to oversimplify, like it must be this, like it's gotta be this thing. And it's like, okay, we're talking about a general pattern. And this is like kind of a side note, but related. And one of my colleagues that also teaches nutrition education, they often talk about when we teach programs for older adults, it's not that older adults are less healthy or are whatever. It's that by the time we reach a certain age, right, all of our kind of food choices, nutrition choices have kind of compounded, if you will, right? Like it's
mhm.
been a pattern over
Personality.
lots of time that's established these things. Um, and so as we think about that now, like, yeah, okay, I'm in my 30s. Like, even if never up to this point has nutrition, healthful, nutrient dense information crossed my path or been a thing I've been interested in or whatever. Okay, like I still have opportunities to make healthful decisions for myself, for my family. Yeah, never too late. And again, general pattern, not I would never have a sugary sweet beverage again in my life, right? That's
Yes.
not what we're doing.
No. No. Yeah. Yes. General
Mhm.
pattern.
General
Yeah.
pattern. Okay. So then the second recommendation is to customize and enjoy nutrient dense food and beverage choices to reflect your personal preferences, cultural traditions, and budgetary considerations. So, right. So, like what I might choose might be different than what Lindy might choose. It might be different than what my neighbor might choose. Or, I think like, someone of a different race, someone of a different culture, someone who
Mhm.
was raised differently, someone who has different, like income and all of the, I mean, preferences, all of these things, right? We're each individual. That's why we say there's more than one way. They're saying there's more than one way with food too, right? I remember
Oh, yeah.
you tell like saying like I worry about broccoli being like that's the green we talk about, and it's like okay, someone else might be worried about like bok choy might be the vegetable that they're like you got to eat this, or like green, like collard greens, or like right there's all of these different things, and that's
Mhm.
all right because there's more than one way.
More than one way, yeah, more than one way to
Mhm,
eat food, period.
yeah.
We eat different foods, we might eat food differently too. So, I
Mhm,
think that's all really important, and I think the budgetary considerations really stands out to me here, especially
mhm.
as I mean, I know that my food budget has changed just with changing food prices recently. So
Yes.
you have to think that it's changed for everybody. So, no matter what income you are, there are tips and tools to help you to meet and to enjoy nutrient dense foods. Extension has one great resource for you readily available. It's called Spend Smart, Eat Smart.
Yeah, and it's so
Uh,
good.
it's so great. Online, it provides tips for budgeting, food budgeting, grocery shopping, recipe cooking, all of the things that you could think about when you're really thinking about creating a food budget for yourself, and then having it reflect a diet, a healthy, nutrient dense diet as well. So
Mhm. Well, and
I
yeah, they
encourage
have
you to
like
go.
yeah, I would
Oh
say
yeah.
and online, you can get recipes. One of my favorite things is, like, in their app that they have, the Spend Smart, Eat Smart
Hmm.
app, is even like, "How do I choose this produce? This is maybe this produce is on sale, but it's new to me. How do I choose a good peach? How do I choose a good avocado? Like, how do I know which things?" That's also in there. So, so much good stuff. Like, how do I choose these things? Help you with that
Yeah.
too. Love Spend Smart, Eat
Yes.
Smart.
So go visit Spend Smart, Eat Smart, or download the app.
Yeah. Yes.
So the next dietary guidelines for American tip is focus on meeting food group needs with nutrient dense foods and beverages and stay within calorie limits. So this is looking kind of at that overarching, like when I look at my plate, what is on my plate? So you want to see those food groups like vegetables, fruits, grains, dairy, protein foods, and oils. And there's certain of those foods that you want to eat more of, and those some of those foods that you want to, um, make sure you're eating like well, I'm trying to think of the right word. There's what we call maximum requirements, so those are the foods
Oh,
you wanna eat
yeah.
the maximum amount of, and then there's minimum requirements. Those are the foods you want
Yeah.
to maybe limit how much you're eating.
Yeah.
And the best tool you have to look at meeting these different food group needs is a tool called My Plate. So this
Mhm.
is the companion piece to the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, the visual of what they talk about in the
Yes.
Dietary Guidelines for Americans. So if you're actually looking at this plate, what it is it's half fruit and vegetables, a quarter of it's protein foods, a quarter of it is uh, carbs or grains, and then
Mhm.
you have a glass of milk along with it as well. So that's a great way just to think when I have my plate, when I have my dinner in front of me, does it have those like if I could divide it out on my plate, does it look like that?
Yes, and I love that I mean, yeah, I think my plate makes it so practical, right? Like, I can just glance and be like, "Yeah, okay." Like, I can commit that to memory better than, like, how many servings of,
Oh yeah.
uh, and so but it is about general food groups, right? We're looking at hitting kind of the broad things, but not as right. We talked about like the micronutrients of like zinc, iron, and not that we don't want to think about those things, but it's a simplified way. If we're meeting these food groups, we're likely going to be getting kind of that balance of nutrients and
Mhm.
minerals and things like that, right?
Yeah. Yep. If you are having a diverse dietary pattern, yes, you're going to be meeting those vitamin, mineral, macronutrient needs.
hmm and I also want to highlight this is not talking about counting macros,
No.
right? We're
Nope.
talking about macronutrients as in food groups, like not that you have to count, track, manage those things. But all right, a balanced plate,
A
a
pattern.
pattern, and I think like a
Mhm.
pattern of variety. I think is the other thing I hear you saying, like
Yes.
that includes variety.
Yeah. Yeah, we get into very specific details, but
Yeah.
like with your vegetables, like maybe not every day. I've had a lot of sweet corn recently,
Oh yes.
which is
Mhm.
wonderful, but Also, maybe the next day I'm having something different than sweet corn as my
Yeah.
vegetable so that I'm not having sweet corn every single day.
Mhm. And again, is like big picture, that's the theme today, right? Wrap it up. Okay, maybe sweet corn at this point of the year, maybe like that there's other things at other points of the year. It's the overall pattern.
Mhm.
Um, and so we love that. All right. And then our last one, kind of the fourth strategy they talk about is limiting foods and beverages that are higher in added sugar, saturated fat, sodium, as well as limiting alcoholic beverages. And so, yeah, like you said, the like maximum and minimum, that there are food groups we want to make sure we're including, and that there's things that we enjoy occasionally. And yeah, even the dietary guidelines for Americans is not like, you know what you should never do. Right?
Yeah.
That's not how they're
Mhm.
looking at it. They're talking about limiting that these things do bring us joy, or they might be a cultural tradition, or they might be, right, these other things that have meaning to us. Or yeah, like I said, like you might just like it.
Yeah.
And
Might
that's
like it
okay.
and yeah, it's definitely okay. I will always say all food fits in a healthy
Yes.
diet. But also it's unrealistic that we will never have added sugar because added sugar is in just about everything that we have. And that's because, again, if you listen back to, I think, our first episode, we talk about, maybe it's our second episode, we talk about how we are predisposed genetically
Yes.
to liking sweet food. It's a survival thing.
Mhm.
So added sugar is, it's unrealistic that we will not have any of it. Um, but we do, the dietary guidelines for Americans does recommend having less than 10% of your total calories come from added sugar. And yeah, that maybe you're probably thinking, Lindy, that's ridiculous. How am I'm not gonna, like, I don't count my calories. I don't count. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna do the math to figure out if I'm having 10 less than 10% of my added sugar
Mhm.
foods every day. But one thing you can do is, recently the all of our nutrition facts labels started putting added sugar, how much added sugar are in food products. And
Mhm.
that includes, if you're looking at that label, you see the actual amount in grams, but then you also see the percentage of daily
Yeah.
value, how much is in that product. So when you're looking at food, really try to aim for foods that have less than, 10% of your well, if you're having multiple of those foods, really aim for foods that are lower in that percentage. Or another way to think about it is try to have less than 50 grams of added sugar per day, about that.
Yeah.
So nutrition facts labels, I highly recommend reading them.
Yeah. Okay, so those are the 4 recommendations from the Dietary Guidelines for Americans that we thought were just like a yeah, this is a nice way to kind of wrap things up. Go big picture again. It's like, all right, like we're thinking about feeding our kids. We're thinking about having variety, division of responsibility, including some food groups and limiting some of those things that aren't as nutrient dense for us. And I also like that in the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, they talked about um, like, okay, so things have to fit within the amount of calories you eat in a day. Not necessarily that you need to count the number of calories, but, like, let's say you are having 2,000. Let's say you were having 2,500, 3,000, 1,500. Like, wherever that lands for that day, that varies from day to day. That in within that, we wanna fit in the things that fuel our body, the
Mhm.
things that are nutrient dense. And so if we are taking in a lot of other things, they can take up that space for where those nutrients need to fit. And I just really liked that as thinking about an adding in method like concepts rather than so often, and with diets and fad diet, all this stuff,
Mhm.
it's like, "Oh, cut that out. Don't do this." Like restriction. It's like, "Wait, that doesn't help us." Thinking about adding in the things that fuel our bodies. I think that was just a nice way for me to think about it.
Oh yeah, that's a beautiful way to think about it. You are
Yeah.
speaking dietitian.
Okay. Do I get like honorary dietitian status
For sure, yeah.
from the season officially? No, very unofficially. I am not a registered dietitian.
Uh.
uh, but I do want to think like pause for just a minute and think I just wanted to ask like as you think about the season, I mean, yeah, you're kind of coming in as I mean, not kind of. You brought in the expertise this season. But I just wanted to like take pause and what's I have things that I've definitely I'm like this has been resonating with me. I've been practicing this. But I wanted to hear what about you? Like what are your thoughts as you think about wrapping up the season, what you've learned, what we've talked about?
Yeah, no, great question. I think what hit home for me this season is, um, this is, even though I am the nutrition expert here and I know these things, I know how to prepare healthy food, I know, how to structure my home environment to have those options for to provide the best the the most supportive way of eating. It's hard. It doesn't make it easy that I know all these
Mm,
things. So I really want you as a listener to know just because we're giving all these tips and strategies and tools doesn't mean it's going to be easy all the time. I even think about the way that, my co-parent and I like talk to our own child when we're eating with them. It's like I still have to catch myself sometimes. I
yeah.
definitely see him catching himself talking, thinking, not saying you need to finish that food or, like
Yes.
those kind of things. So just because I know these things doesn't mean I'm always perfect at practicing them. So don't be too hard on yourself if this is something you're learning over time. It's not something you can shift to and automatically be perfect at.
Yeah. I love that. That like, there's the reality, right? Like, you have the research and there's the reality.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, my big ones are kind of 2 things. One, I've been reading more nutrition labels. Um, yeah, Lindy's like, "Yeah." I know, I
Clapping.
haven't. Part of it was in our conversations about whole grains. I'm like, we do. I tend to think more about like fruit, vegetable, protein, carb, and whole grains wasn't really on my radar. And so I've been thinking kind of strategically about that. And yeah, I'm not doing like everything we talked about in all this whole season, but that is one area that I'm like, you know what? Let's think about incorporating more whole grains. And it's been fun actually. So I shared the like bow tie noodle. Did I say that right? Bow tie noodle. All of a sudden I
Mhm.
felt like I said something wrong. um, that story about my daughter loves bow tie noodles. Any other kind of
But
noodle
not
with it all.
tortellini, right?
Yeah,
Not
not totally.
tortellini.
That's a no for her. Still repeated exposure. We're gonna get there. Um, but we have been kind of playfully at just like exploring other noodles. And so last time, she came to the store with me. We would usually go buy bow tie noodles. And it's like, you know what, Millie? I've been learning about whole grains and how those fuel our body. And I think looking at pasta that has whole grains would be a great option for us. And so she was there. She helped me pick which shape. Like, right, we were reading the boxes because she's kind of learning to read. And like, okay, this one says whole grain, this one says whole wheat. Like, and we were looking at that. We picked a new one. She picked penne, right? Like, and so that was all
Mhm.
right. And we tried that. And then the next time we went to the store together, it was like, okay. Then she was familiar with that shape. And then I was like,
Mm.
okay, this shape of pasta is now cleared. And so, but we did. We just bought like lentil pasta that's like penne shaped this week because it's like, that's a different kind. And so we've just been kind of gradually is the word I want to use. Like, we've been
Yes.
gradually kind of exploring it together and um, having the process like, what do we think of this one? And then the second component of that is I always say, like, I want my life to be automated, like,
Mm.
that I wanna simplify this decision process, and so, yeah, I'm not trying to, like, read every single nutrition label in the grocery store right now. I'm focusing on finding more whole grain, and then once we've figured out, like, these are the products we tend to like, they can become kind of our regular buying habit, right? Like,
Oh,
granola
yeah.
bars is another one where I've been thinking about looking for a whole grain option with less added sugar. And so we're kind of like on the hunt for a granola bar that works well for our family that has kind of those goals because granola bars are a regular thing we eat and have in our house. And so those have been like simple swaps that we're exploring. And then once we've landed, I don't have to read those nutrition labels every time I go to the store,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Oh, and well, one, I have to say, I'm just so happy to hear all of that. I just brings me so much joy.
Yeah, it's been
Another
fun,
reason why I've gotten into
honestly.
nutrition because it's so fun to hear about people
Mhm.
making these changes. But
Yeah.
then also, you bring up such an amazing point about, and I feel this very strongly with diets. The people, I mean, well, I don't think people should go on diets, anyways. I think people
Mm,
should just follow a healthy dietary pattern. But
yeah,
diets fail for so many people because we try to drastically and unrealistically change the way we eat food. And so the
yeah.
way you're doing it with these kind of gradual, sustainable shifts, that make it easy for you as a parent, kind of automate your life, but also provide these, you're bringing your child into making that decision with you. You're providing that autonomy to make those decisions.
Yeah.
So, just practicing all those positive parenting food style or practices right there.
Well, thanks. But it
Hmm.
has been, it's been fun has been the thing. Like, sometimes I feel like I get overwhelmed or negative about like, "Ugh." It's like, okay, I'm not doing everything.
Hmm.
Like, whole grains is like our current kind of mission. And yeah, literally it's been like pasta. Some like we've done some crackers, like we did a cracker swap of what we might have bought before to something that was whole grain. We didn't love that one, so we're still figuring that out. But then, yeah, like looking granola bars, those are like the 3 things that it's like, "All right, we could look for opportunities for whole grains here,"
Mhm.
because 'cause they're
Yeah.
things we already eat. Like, those are already a part of our regular diet, so
Yeah. And I love you even saying these are things there are things in our regular diet that we can change that are the healthier option.
yeah, and honestly, as I think about, yeah, my kids only get so many calories in a day they're gonna consume. All right, oh, getting a whole grain in there, that helps, right?
Mhm.
More nutrient density, so
Oh, yeah, 100%.
yes. So yeah, it's been a really we've had a lot of fun this season. I do want to highlight, kind of here towards the end of our episode, we talk about kind of some strategies throughout this episode. Of course, we talked about, I mean, everything we've covered this season, but in particular, highlighting the resources that are available to us, like Spend Smart, Eat Smart, either online or on the app. Great resource from Iowa State Extension. There's also My Plate that Lindy talked about, and again, a great visual to help us think about it. And then don't forget about your nutrition labels. Those are a great. That's a great resource that you have and a strategy. Just reading. I mean, I was appalled to look at some of the things that we buy regularly that I just had no idea. That I was just
Mhm.
uninformed. Like I did not know that had that much added sugar, or I thought this was whole grain and I didn't know it wasn't. Um, and so just learning about some of those things. So great strategies and resources at our fingertips to help implement a more kind of healthful dietary pattern over our lifetime. So that brings us to our stop, breathe, talk space with Mackenzie DeYoung, our podcast producer. What do we got?
Well, my first two questions I have written down, you basically already answered. So,
All right.
We're
if
Done.
good.
See ya.
Mhm.
you have any more to add, can feel free to add. But if you're good, you can say you're good. So I wrote down your biggest personal takeaway from the season, and then the one thing you'd like listeners to keep in mind. Do you
Mhm.
have anything else to add based on what you've said, or you think that you kind of covered that?
Keep in mind, you can go back and listen to the episodes again.
There you go.
All right. Self promoting. She's in. Wendy's staying. um, I think I would just add that, like, we're sharing information and you get to make decisions about it for your family, for your kids, based on your culture, all that. Sweet
Absolutely. All
decisions.
right. Love that. And then thanks to Barb, she inserted another question that is a really great question.
Mhm.
Um, we talked briefly about Spend Smart, Eat Smart, but what is each of your favorite things about Spend Smart, Eat Smart?
Ooh.
I mean, I love the recipes. I've had the privilege of being able to do some recipe testing for them.
Mm.
And I'm just a kind of I'm a nut for I'm those person who, when I have spare time, I'm like looking at for different recipes. So, and if you can't see me on video, but that's me scrolling through my phone for different recipes.
Totally.
So I really like I personally what I use the most is for the recipes, but I think the budget tips are spectacular.
Mhm. Uh, and yeah, I appreciate that they encourage the choice. I mean, like, philosophically, I appreciate that. But even just the reminder of, like, I can just buy a, like, frozen bag of veggies to include in
Mhm,
something. You know, yeah, I feel like we're on the go in those things, and so ideas that simplify, right? You can buy fresh produce, you can buy frozen, you can buy canned.
mhm.
Or, you can get those things, right? Wherever you get food pantry, grocery store, gas station, etc. So I love that. And then, like I said earlier, I love the, like, produce selection tips, like,
Mhm.
Mhm.
"Oh, I don't usually buy this. How do I know?" Like a whole pineapple.
Yeah,
Like, how do I pick one?
right?
Um, all that kinda stuff I love.
I was actually going to say, so Produce Basics, I think, is one of the cool parts of Spend Smart, Eat Smart, is because they have those tips of like how to pick certain ones, but
Mhm,
they also have ideas for recipes. So they kind of
Mhm.
link back to what recipes have that in it. So if
mhm.
you're like, I have no idea what to do with, um, oh,
Kumquat, naturally.
yeah, I was thinking of what are the things that look like little aliens that I can't think of what they're called.
Oh.
Little aliens.
They look like
Artichokes.
little aliens to me, but now I'm totally blanking on what
Oh, that's funny.
vegetable it is.
It's a vegetable?
Yeah, they, like, grow, like, then the, like, sprouts come out the sides.
Oh, kohlrabi?
Yeah, that's what
Oh
I'm
my
thinking.
gosh.
Kohlrabi.
Only a
I actually don't
dietitian.
know if I actually don't know if that's on Produce Basics. It
That's
might
funny.
be though. But they're
Ugh.
like, "How do you cook this? What do you do with this?"
Yeah.
And I think kohlrabi's pretty good, and it's something people are like, "What the heck is this?" And I say,
Mhm.
"Yeah, it looks like an alien."
Yeah.
So, that is one of my favorite parts, but definitely something
Mm,
to explore. So,
mhm.
Awesome.
Which kohlrabi is a very it's grows well in Iowa, so it's
mhm.
around a lot in the summer. And you're right, it is one of those things. It's like jicama. It's like what do I do with jicama?
What the
Yeah.
heck?
It's
Yeah.
another root vegetable, but yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah. So, all right, well,
I love
thank
that.
you. And thanks for answering my question before I even got to it.
Yeah. We love to sneak those in and steal your thunder.
Oh, yeah, I was like, "Oh, there she goes again."
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Kens. So, yeah, that's a wrap on season 10.
Mhm.
This is me, like, crying, but not crying. Hold it together. Um, but
Now
yeah, we
we're
just
gonna just have to meet for wraps.
yeah,
Sweet.
yeah, now we're just gonna, like, get together and have wraps together. But yeah, because this is kind of our end of our time here with Lindy on season 10, oh my gosh, I've appreciated, I mean, the conversation, the resources you've shared, the everything. I'm just gonna hang
Yeah.
out with Lindy, guys.
Yep. Yes, please, please. And yes, I am leaving this side of the podcast, but I will always be a listener. I'll always be on the other side of
Oh.
that podcast.
Well, thanks. Well, hopefully there'll be all kinds of opportunities, like, we'll be hunting you down again, so so we've had a lot of fun this season, we've covered, we talked throughout the episode on a lot of that, but it has been great to tap into your expertise, both and your experience, as a professional and as a parent, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. So, and thank you, listeners, for hanging with us today on the Science of Parenting podcast. Don't forget that you can follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter at Science of Parenting or Science of Parent. My bad. Science of Parents on Facebook and Twitter. And this is a good way to stay caught up with us between seasons. So, before season 11, you can find us on social media.
So come along with us as we tackle the ups and downs, the ins and outs, and the research and reality all around the science of parenting.
The Science of Parenting is hosted by Mackenzie Johnson, produced by Mackenzie DeYoung, with research and writing by Barbara Dunn Swanson. Send in questions and comments to parenting@iastate.edu and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or accommodation inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.